When Catherine Ramirez came home earlier than usual that Thursday afternoon, she heard something unbelievable coming from the guest room. Her blind nephew, Danny, was describing colors he'd never seen. Red is like the warmth of the sun on your face at midday. Blue is the coolness of mountain stream water as it touches your fingertips. Yellow is the laughter of a happy child that you feel right here, in your chest. Catherine froze in the hallway. Danny was 14 years old. 14 years spent living in a world without light, without color. 14 years, never seeing a sunrise or even the face of his own mother. So, how could he describe them with such precision? The answer was behind that door, and when Catherine opened it, what she saw wouldn't just change Danny's life, it would change hers forever. But to understand that Thursday afternoon, you need to know how they got there. Because this isn't just a story about a blind boy learning to paint. It's a story about guilt, about redemption, and about how miracles sometimes don't come from doctors or expensive therapists. They come from the hands of a housekeeper that nobody ever noticed. Catherine Soto Ramirez was 52 years old, and she owned 15 art galleries scattered across the United States. Elegant galleries with Italian marble floors, perfect lighting, and artworks that cost more than a normal family would earn in 10 years. She knew every important artist. She could spot a fake Georgia O'Keeffe from 15 feet away. She'd built an empire dedicated to visual beauty. The irony was cruel, because while Catherine filled her galleries with art, people paid fortunes to see. In her own house lived a boy who would never see anything, and she barely even looked at him. Danny hadn't always lived with his Aunt Catherine. Until 2 years ago, he lived with his mother, Mary Ann, Catherine's younger sister. The two sisters weren't speaking. 3 years of silence over a fight about their parents' inheritance. 3 years where Catherine chose pride over family. And then the call came. Mary Ann's cancer was terminal. She had weeks, maybe days. Catherine wanted to go. She wanted to apologize. She wanted to tell her younger sister she was sorry, that the money didn't matter, that she loved her. But she waited. She waited for the right moment that never came. Mary Ann died on a Tuesday afternoon, alone in a public hospital. Danny, her 12-year-old blind son, was in the waiting room, a boy who never saw his mother's face, and now would never hear her voice again. At the funeral, Catherine approached Danny. The boy didn't cry. He only asked in a low voice, "Where am I going to live now?" Catherine took a deep breath. She was his only family. There was no other option. "With me," she replied. "You'll live with me." Danny nodded silently, as if he already knew it was an obligation, not a choice made with love. And so, they began living together. A millionaire aunt who didn't know how to love, and a blind nephew who'd learned not to expect anything from anyone. The first 2 years were mechanical, functional. Catherine gave Danny a large room, new clothes, quality food. A private school specializing in visually impaired children. Everything money could buy. Everything except time. Everything except presence. Everything except true love. Catherine left at 6 in the morning and returned at 9 at night, sometimes later. Her galleries needed her. Her meetings were urgent. Her clients couldn't wait. Danny ate dinner alone most nights. He'd learned to move around the house using his hands, counting steps, memorizing every corner. He was intelligent, very intelligent. His teacher at school had said so. Danny has exceptional auditory memory. He learns quickly, but he needs confidence. He needs someone to believe in him. Catherine nodded during the school meetings. But in her mind, she was already thinking about her next exhibition, about the Japanese artist arriving in 2 weeks, about the sales figures she needed to review. Danny was a responsibility she fulfilled, not a nephew she loved. And Danny knew it. Children always do. If you've ever felt like you're a burden to someone, that your existence is more an obligation than a gift, then you understand how Danny felt every day. And if you've ever been the one who made someone else feel that way, this story is for you too. It was 4 months ago that Catherine hired Rosie Mendoza as a housekeeper. The previous one had left after only 3 weeks. Too much work, she said. Such a big house for one person. And besides, the boy. As if Danny were an obstacle, not a person. Catherine interviewed Rosie on a Monday morning. 48 years old, experienced in cleaning and cooking, verifiable references, nothing extraordinary on her resume, but there was something in her eyes when Rosie asked, "Is the boy the one who lives here? The one who's visually impaired?" Catherine tensed. "Yes, my nephew Danny. He's blind." Rosie nodded slowly. "My mother was blind too. She lived with us until she died 5 years ago. I know what it's like, not just the physical part, the emotional part too." There was a silence. Then Rosie added, "If you hire me, I'll treat your nephew with the same respect I treated my mother, as a complete person, not as a burden." Catherine didn't know why, but something in those words made her hire Rosie at that very moment. She started the next day, 6 in the morning. Rosie arrived punctually, always with a quiet smile, and began her cleaning routine while Catherine prepared for the office. Danny woke up at 7. Rosie already had his breakfast ready: scrambled eggs, freshly squeezed orange juice, toast with butter. "Good morning, Danny," Rosie said in a clear and warm voice. "I made your favorites. The eggs are at 9 o'clock on your plate, the juice at 2, the toast at 12. Danny sat in silence. He was used to housekeepers who barely spoke to him, who left food without explaining where everything was. But Rosie was different. "How did you sleep?" she asked. "Did you dream anything nice?" At first, Danny only answered with monosyllables. "Fine. No." But Rosie didn't give up. Every morning she asked questions. Every afternoon, when he returned from school, she asked him how his day was, what he learned, if any classmates were kind to him. And slowly, very slowly, Danny began to open up. One day, 3 weeks after Rosie started, Danny asked her something Catherine had never asked him. "Rosie, how do you describe a color to someone who's never seen it?" Rosie stopped cleaning. She sat down at the table across from Danny, and for the first time in 2 years, someone gave Danny a real answer. "Colors aren't just things you see, Danny. They're things you feel, you smell, you hear. If you close your eyes and think about the warmest moment you've ever felt, that warmth has a color. It's red." Danny tilted his head, intrigued. "And if you think about the sound of water flowing, the feeling of coolness in your hands, that sound has a color. It's blue." "Why has no one ever explained it to me like this?" Danny whispered. Rosie smiled, even though the boy couldn't see her. "Because most people only see colors with their eyes. I'm going to teach you to see them with your soul." That was the day everything started, but Catherine had no idea about any of this. She left early, came back late, and assumed Rosie was just doing her job, cleaning, cooking, making sure Danny was okay. She had no idea what was happening in her own house every morning. Rosie had a secret she didn't include in her resume. Before working as a housekeeper, she was a visual arts teacher for 15 years at a public school. She loved teaching. She loved watching children discover they could create beauty with their hands. But budget cuts came. The arts were the first to go, and Rosie, along with 12 other teachers, lost their jobs. She needed to survive. She had 2 daughters in college, bills to pay, so she took what she could find: cleaning, cooking, housework, but she never stopped being a teacher at heart. When she met Danny, she saw something no one else had seen: a bright boy with an exceptional memory, with deep emotional sensitivity, a boy who could understand the world in ways people with sight never would. And then Rosie had a crazy idea, an idea that any practical person would call impossible. "I'm going to teach him to paint, not just to understand colors, to paint them, to create art with his hands." to express what he feels without using words. Because if his blind mother could describe the world with words so beautiful that Rosie still remembered them 15 years after her death, then Danny could create that world with colors. But she couldn't tell Catherine. The wealthy woman would never understand. She'd think it was a waste of time, that Danny should focus on practical things. So Rosie decided to do it in secret. 3 months ago, Rosie started small steps, gentle, without pressure. First, she taught Danny to feel textures, smooth paper versus rough paper, soft fabric versus coarse fabric, cold surfaces versus warm surfaces. Then she taught him about shapes, circles he could trace with his fingers, straight lines he could feel with his hands, triangles with pointy corners, and then came the colors. Rosie brought an old notebook from home, a notebook her mother had used years ago. On the cover, it said in careful lettering, "A dictionary of colors for those who see with their heart." Inside, her mother had written sensory descriptions of each color. Red, the heat of the midday sun touching your face, the sound of loud laughter, the smell of fresh roses, the emotion of explosive joy. Blue, the coolness of mountain water on your fingers, the sound of the calm sea, the smell of approaching rain, the emotion of deep calm. Yellow, the gentle warmth of the morning, the sound of a happy child's laughter, the smell of bread baking, the emotion of bright hope. Green, the freshness of grass after the rain, the sound of wind through the trees, the smell of wet leaves, the emotion of growth and life. Purple, the mystery of the night when it isn't completely dark, the sound of soft, deep music, the smell of exotic flowers, the emotion of magic and the unknown. Orange, the moderate warmth of the sunset, the sound of vibrant energy, the smell of sweet fruits, the emotion of contained enthusiasm. Rosie read these descriptions to Danny every morning, and Danny memorized them, not as cold data, but as real experiences. By the 10th day, Danny could recite each color without error. By the 20th day, Danny began to associate his own emotions with each color, and on the 30th day, Rosie brought something that would change everything: paints, brushes, and a small canvas. "Danny," Rosie said that morning, "today we're going to paint." Danny frowned. "How am I going to paint if I can't see?" "You don't need to see the canvas with your eyes. You're going to see it with your mind. I'm going to guide you." And so they began. Rosie explained where to put the brush. She described what he was creating. She told him when to change color. But most importantly, she let Danny feel, to experiment, to make mistakes. The first painting was a technical disaster. Colors mixed without control, shapes without definition. Any art critic would have thrown it in the trash. But when Rosie held Danny's hands over the finished canvas, when he touched the textures of the dry paint, something changed in his eyes. "I did this?" he asked in a trembling voice. "You did it," Rosie confirmed. Danny smiled. For the first time since his mother's death, he smiled for real, and Rosie knew she was on the right path. For the next 89 days, Rosie and Danny painted every morning, from 6 to 7:15, 45 minutes of secret art before Catherine came down for breakfast. Rosie documented each session in her notebook. Day 1, first painting. Danny confused but curious. Day 10. Danny starts to understand spatial location. Day 30. Danny mixes colors based on emotions. Day 60. Danny creates his first composition with purpose. 89 days, 89 45-minute sessions, 4,005 minutes of believing in a boy who no one else believed could create art. But it wasn't just painting that was happening. It was transformation. Danny started to talk more, to laugh more, to walk more confidently around the house. His school teacher called Catherine one day. "Your nephew has changed, Mrs. Ramirez. I don't know what's happening at home, but Danny is more engaged, more self-assured. It's as if someone has given him a reason to believe in something. Catherine frowned. Nothing had changed that she knew of. Maybe it's maturity, she replied distractedly as she checked emails, but something had changed, and Catherine was about to find out. 2 weeks ago, Catherine started noticing little things. Blue paint stains on a bathroom towel, a small red smudge on the corner of the dining room table, traces of dry paint in the kitchen sink. Where was this coming from? She asked Rosie. Is it from the cleaning work? Are you painting something? Rosie tensed for a second. Just small things that needed touching up, Mom. The walls, some of the picture frames. I'm so sorry if I left any stains. Catherine nodded and thought no more about it. Rosie was usually so careful. She trusted her, but the stains kept appearing, and Catherine, though busy, wasn't stupid. Then came that Thursday afternoon. Catherine had a meeting scheduled with a famous German artist, a meeting that could mean millions in sales. But at the last minute, the artist cancelled. Flight problems. For the first time in months, Catherine would be home early, 5:30 in the afternoon. She entered the house quietly. There wasn't a sound on the first floor. Rosie must be in the kitchen, or in her guest room preparing dinner. But then she heard something, a voice, Danny's voice. Red is like the warmth of the midday sun on your face. Blue is the coolness of mountain water, touching your fingers. Yellow is the laughter of a happy child that you feel in your chest. Catherine froze. Danny was describing colors. How? She slowly approached the hallway that led to the guest room. The door was slightly ajar, and then she heard Rosie's voice. Very good. Danny, now tell me, what color do you want to use for the sky? Blue, Danny replied without hesitation, but not a sad blue, a peaceful blue, like mountain water. Perfect. Take the brush. I'm going to guide your hand. Catherine gently pushed the door open, and what she saw left her completely still. Danny was sitting in front of a small table. On the table, there was a canvas, paints, brushes, jars of water. His hands, covered in paint, were holding a brush with Rosie's help, and on the canvas there was something Catherine never expected to see. A painting, a real painting. It wasn't perfect. The colors were in strange places. The sky was blue, but it also had green spots. The sun was yellow, but with touches of red and orange mixed in. But there was something about that painting, something that Catherine, with her 15 galleries and her 30 years in the art world, recognized immediately. True emotion. Danny was painting. Her blind nephew was creating art. And Rosie, her housekeeper, was teaching him. With infinite patience, with pure love. Catherine felt something break in her chest. It wasn't physical pain. It was worse. It was the painful realization that a housekeeper she paid a pittance knew Danny better than she did. That Rosie had seen talent where Catherine only saw disability. That Rosie had given time where Catherine only gave money. I can see colors in my mind. Rosie, Danny said in a soft voice, but filled with joy. When you describe red, I see it. Not with my eyes, but I see it. Rosie squeezed Danny's hand gently. I know, sweetie, because you see with something more powerful than eyes. You see with your heart. Catherine took a step back. Tears were already running down her face, uncontrollably. She walked away from the guest room without making a sound. She went up to her bedroom, closed the door, and she cried. She cried for her sister Mary Ann, whom she never apologized to. She cried for Danny, whom she treated as an obligation instead of a gift. She cried for herself, because she built an empire of art, but didn't know what true beauty was. And she cried from shame, because a housekeeper who earned less in a month than Catherine spent on a lunch had taught her what it meant to love for real. That night, Catherine didn't come down for dinner. She told Rosie she wasn't feeling well. She needed to be alone, but she wasn't sick in her body. She was sick in her soul. And as she lay in her bed, in the darkness of her room filled with empty luxuries, Catherine made a decision. Tomorrow, everything would change. If you've ever ignored someone who needed your attention, if you've ever chosen work over love, if you've ever thought that money could replace presence, then you know exactly how Catherine felt that night. And if you've been that someone ignored, that person treated as a burden instead of a treasure, then you know exactly how Danny felt for 2 years. But this story doesn't end here. In fact, it's just beginning. Because what Catherine would do the next day wouldn't just change Danny's life. It would change the way hundreds of visually impaired children across the United States would learn to see art. And it all started with a housekeeper that nobody noticed, a woman who earned minimum wage, but had a heart bigger than any millionaire. Her name was Rosie Mendoza, and what she didn't know was that she was about to become the most famous art teacher in the entire country. No college degree in hand, no gallery of her own, nothing but love, and an old notebook called Dictionary of Colors. Sometimes, miracles don't come dressed in suits. They come dressed in a housekeeper's uniform and yellow cleaning gloves. And sometimes, the best teachers aren't in expensive universities. They're in the guest rooms, teaching in secret, believing in children that the world stopped seeing. The following morning came too soon. Catherine didn't sleep. She spent all night staring at the ceiling of her room, thinking about everything she had seen: Danny's hands covered in paint, Rosie's smile, the phrase that she couldn't stop hearing in her mind: "I can see colors in my mind." At 6 minutes past 6 in the morning, Catherine heard the sound of the front door opening. Rosie was arriving, punctual as always. Catherine got up. She put on a robe. She went downstairs without making a sound. Rosie was in the kitchen, preparing Danny's breakfast. She hadn't realized Catherine was there. "Rosie," Catherine said in a low voice. Rosie turned around quickly, surprised. "Mrs. Ramirez, good morning. I thought you had already left for work." Catherine shook her head. "I need to talk to you." Rosie tensed up, her face filled with worry. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," Catherine replied. "You did something that I should have done 2 years ago, and I need to know how. I need to understand everything." There was a long silence. Rosie knew exactly what Catherine was talking about. "You saw me yesterday," Rosie said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. "I saw you," Catherine confirmed. "I saw Danny painting. I heard what he said about seeing colors in his mind. And I need you to tell me the whole story, from the beginning." Rosie took a deep breath. She knew this moment would come eventually. She just hoped she would have more time. "Sit down, Mum. This is going to take a while." Catherine sat down at the kitchen table. The same table where Danny had breakfast every morning. The same table where Rosie had taught him about colors 3 months ago. And Rosie began to tell her story. She started with her mother, a woman who lost her sight at 40 due to a degenerative disease. A woman who refused to surrender to the darkness. "My mother taught me that blind people don't live in a world without colors," Rosie explained. "They live in a world where colors are different, where red isn't just red, it's heat, it's emotion, it's life." Rosie pulled the old notebook from her bag, the Dictionary of Colors. She placed it on the table in front of Catherine. "This was written by my mother. She spent years describing each color in ways that she could understand. For her, for me, for anyone who needed to see the world without eyes." Catherine opened the notebook carefully. The pages were yellowed, the ink was faded in places, but the words remained clear, powerful. She began to read aloud. "Red, the warmth of the midday sun touching your face." Her voice broke. She closed the notebook. "How long have you been teaching Danny?" 3 months, Rosie replied. 89 days exactly. Every morning from 6 to 7:15. Before you come downstairs, before he goes to school. Why in secret?" Rosie looked directly into Catherine's eyes. "Because I thought you wouldn't allow it, that you'd say it was a waste of time, that Danny needed to focus on practical things." Catherine felt the sting of those words, because Rosie was right. If she had asked for permission 3 months ago, Catherine would have said exactly that. "I'm sorry," Catherine whispered. Rosie shook her head. "You don't need to apologize to me, Mom, but you do need to apologize to Danny." "I know," Catherine said. "I will. But first, I need to understand, how did you know he could paint? How did you even think to try?" Rosie smiled slightly, a sad smile, but filled with hope. "Before working as a housekeeper, I was a visual arts teacher for 15 years. I loved teaching, but when the government cut funding, I lost my job. I needed to survive, so I took what I could find." Catherine was still. She knew nothing of this. She had never asked. "When I met Danny, I saw something I recognized immediately. A child, hungry to learn, with curiosity, with deep emotional sensitivity. And I thought, if my blind mother could describe the world with such beauty, then this child can create beauty too." Rosie opened her bag again and pulled out another notebook. This one was new, blue in color. On the cover it said, "Project Danny, 89 days. I documented every session," Rosie explained, "what I taught, how Danny reacted, what progress he made each day." Catherine took the notebook. She opened it to a random page. "Day 47. Danny mixed blue and yellow without me asking. He said, 'I want to make the color of hope growing.' He created green. I cried when I went home." Catherine felt a lump in her throat. She turned to another page. Day 62. "Danny asked about his mother today. He said, 'Rosie, do you think my mom can see me from where she is?' I told him yes, that she sees him with pride." Danny replied, "Then I'm going to paint something for her, something she can feel even up there." Tears began to fall onto the pages of the notebook. Catherine didn't try to stop them. Day 78. Danny painted for 45 minutes non-stop. He didn't need much guidance. I just described the location of the brush, and he created. At the end, he said, "This is freedom, right, Rosie? Being able to create something all your own." I said, "Yes, honey, this is being free." Catherine closed the notebook. She couldn't read anymore. She couldn't bear to see how much she had missed, how much she didn't know about her own nephew. "Can I see the paintings?" Catherine asked, her voice trembling. Rosie nodded. "They're in my room. Wait here." Rosie left the kitchen. She returned 3 minutes later with a large portfolio. She opened it on the table. Inside were 18 paintings, all small in size, all created by Danny. The first was chaotic, colors mixed without control. But it had energy. It had life. "This was the first one," Rosie explained. Day 30. Danny still didn't understand space or composition. He was just experimenting with feeling the colors. Catherine moved to the second painting. This one had more form, circles of different colors. Some touched, some floated alone. Day 40, Danny was learning about distance. I told him that some circles are close and others far away. He asked how you paint distance. I told him with pressure, hard for close, soft for far. "And it worked?" Rosie smiled. "Look at the circles. The darker ones are painted with more pressure, the lighter ones with less." Danny understood without seeing. Catherine continued to flip through the paintings. With each one, she saw clear progress. She saw intention. She saw true art emerging. And then she came to a painting that took her breath away. It was different from all the others. It had a central figure, an oval of red and orange mixed together. Around it, strokes of soft blue, and in the upper corner, bright yellow. "What is this?" Catherine asked. Rosie looked at the painting with tenderness. Day 82. I asked Danny to paint a memory of his mother, a happy moment he remembered with her. "And what did he paint?" Rosie pointed to the central oval. "He said that his mother was warm, like the midday sun. That's why he used red and orange." Rosie pointed to the blue around it. "He said that she made him feel calm, like cool water. That's why the blue." Rosie pointed to the yellow. "And he said that being with her was pure joy, like a child's laughter. That's why the yellow." Catherine held the painting with trembling hands. This wasn't just a painting. It was memory turned into color. It was love made visible through the hands of a blind child. "It's beautiful," Catherine whispered. "Really beautiful." "Oh, it's more than beautiful," Rosie said. "It's proof that Danny isn't limited by his eyes. He's free through his imagination." There's a silence in that moment that Catherine will never forget. A silence where everything changed. Where the millionaire who built an empire of art galleries finally understood what true art was. It wasn't what cost millions. It wasn't what hung on marble walls. It was this, a blind child painting the memory of his dead mother, with colors he had never seen but felt in his soul. What would you have done in Catherine's position, with all the money in the world, but no time or love to give? When you discover that a housekeeper did more for your nephew in 3 months than you did in 2 years, when you realize that pride and guilt robbed you of the opportunity to really know the only family you have left. It's not easy, is it? To admit that we fail, that we chose wrong, that we need help to fix what we broke. But that's exactly what Catherine was about to do. "Rosie," Catherine said, wiping away her tears, "I need your help." Rosie tilted her head. "For what, ma'am?" "To be the aunt Danny deserves. To learn to see what you see. To understand my nephew the way you understand him." Rosie smiled, a genuine smile. "Of course, ma'am," she said. "But you don't need my help for that. You just need to be present. Love isn't complicated. It's simple, it's time, it's attention, it's showing you care." "And the painting lessons?" Catherine asked. "I want them to continue, but not in secret. I want to be there. I want to learn too. If Danny will let me." Rosie nodded. "We'll ask him together." Just then, they heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Danny was waking up. It was 7:05, breakfast time. Danny walked into the kitchen, counting his steps. 15 from the stairs to the table. He had memorized it perfectly. "Good morning, Rosie," Danny said. Then he paused. He sniffed the air. "Is someone else here?" Catherine felt her heart race. "It's me, Danny. Your Aunt Catherine." Danny tensed slightly. "Is something wrong? You're never here at this hour." "Nothing's wrong," Catherine replied softly. "But there's something I need to tell you. Can I sit with you?" Danny nodded slowly. He sat in his usual chair. Catherine sat across from him. Rosie gave them space. She moved to the corner of the kitchen, but stayed close in case Danny needed her. Catherine took a deep breath. She didn't know how to start. She had run thousands of business meetings. She had negotiated with famous artists. She had closed deals worth millions of dollars. But she had never done anything as hard as this, apologizing to a 14-year-old boy who deserved so much more than she had given him. "Danny," Catherine began, "yesterday I came home early, and I saw you in the guest room. I saw you painting with Rosie." Danny stiffened. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done it without permission. Rosie was teaching me, and I—" "No," Catherine interrupted. "You have nothing to apologize for." "I do." Danny frowned, confused. "I have to apologize because for 2 years, I treated you like an obligation. I gave you money, food, a room, but I didn't give you what you really needed. I didn't give you time. I didn't give you attention. I didn't give you real love." Danny remained silent. His hands were on the table, still. "And I have to apologize because Rosie, your teacher, saw talent in you that I never looked for. She believed you could paint when I didn't even think it was possible. She knows you better in 3 months than I do in 2 years." Catherine's voice cracked. "And that's my fault. Not yours, mine, because I chose my work over you, because I let the guilt of not reconciling with your mother keep me from loving you the way you deserve." Danny lowered his head. Catherine saw a tear fall onto the table. "But I want to change that," Catherine continued. "If you give me a chance, if you allow me to start again, I want to really know you. I want you to keep painting. I want to be present." "Why now?" Danny asked softly. "Why not 2 years ago? Catherine felt the weight of that question. It was fair. It was hard. It was necessary. Because 2 years ago, I was still blinded by my own pain, by my own guilt. And it took seeing a housekeeper teaching you with love for me to realize that I was the blind one, not you. Danny raised his head slightly. His eyes couldn't see Catherine, but his face was turned toward her. Rosie says that colors aren't just things you see, Danny said. They're things you feel, that most people only see with their eyes, but some people see with their soul. Catherine nodded, even though Danny couldn't see her. She's right. And I've been soul blind for 2 years. Danny extended his hand slowly across the table. An invitation, an offering of forgiveness. Catherine took his hand, with tears running freely down her face. Can I be in the painting lessons? Catherine asked. I want to learn too. I want to see the world the way you see it. Danny smiled, a small but real smile. You can, but you have to learn the color dictionary. Rosie says that's the basis of everything. I'll learn it, Catherine promised. Whatever it takes. Rosie came over to the table. She put her hand on Danny's shoulder. Ms. Ramirez, Rosie said, if you're going to learn, you have to start today. The next session is tomorrow at 6 in the morning. You need to be ready. I'll be ready, Catherine confirmed. And so, in that kitchen at 7:30 in the morning on an ordinary Friday, began the real transformation. Not just of Danny, not just of Rosie, but of Catherine. Because sometimes, the greatest miracles aren't the ones we do for others. They're the ones that others do for us by showing us who we really are. And who was Catherine really? She wasn't just a millionaire with art galleries. She wasn't just a sister who lost the chance to reconcile. She wasn't just a distant aunt who paid the bills. She was someone capable of changing, capable of admitting mistakes, capable of choosing love over pride. And that was more valuable than any work of art in her 15 galleries. That afternoon, Catherine did something she hadn't done in years. She cancelled all her meetings. She turned off her phone, and she stayed home with Danny. She asked him to tell her about his day at school, about his classes, about his friends, about what he had learned that week. Danny was cautious at first. He wasn't used to Catherine asking, but slowly he began to open up. He told her about his Braille class, about how he was reading a book of poetry, about a classmate named Sophia, who was also blind and played the piano incredibly well. Catherine listened, really listened. She didn't think about emails. She didn't check her watch. She didn't plan her next meeting. She was just present. And for the first time since Danny came to live with her, Catherine really saw her nephew, not as a responsibility, not as the son of her dead sister, but as Danny, a bright, sensitive, talented boy who had been waiting 2 years for someone to really see him. That night, during dinner, Catherine asked a question that would change everything. Danny, will you show me your favorite painting, the one you like the most out of all the ones you've done? Danny nodded. It's in Rosie's room. It's the one I painted for my mom. Rosie went to get it. She put it on the table in front of Catherine. Tell me about it, Catherine asked. And Danny did. He described every color, every stroke, every emotion he put on the canvas. The red and orange are Mom's warmth. The blue is how she made me feel calm. The yellow is the joy I felt when I was with her. Catherine looked at the painting with new eyes, not with the critical eyes of an art expert, but with the heart of an aunt who was finally learning to love. That's the most beautiful painting I've ever seen in my life, Catherine said honestly. Really? Danny asked, incredulous. Really? Because it doesn't just show technique, it shows soul, and that can't be taught. You bring that from inside. Danny smiled so widely that Catherine thought her heart would explode with joy and pain. Mixed. Joy for this moment, pain for all the moments she'd lost. But she wouldn't lose any more. She promised herself that. The next day, Saturday morning, Catherine woke up at 5:45. She got dressed, went down to the kitchen. Rosie was already there, preparing the space for painting. "Are you sure about this?" Rosie asked. "You don't have to do it if you don't want to." Catherine shook her head. "I need to do it. For Danny, for me, for my sister who's no longer here to see it." Rosie nodded. "Then let's begin." For the next hour and a half, Catherine learned what Danny had learned in 89 days. Rosie taught her the color dictionary. She made her close her eyes and describe what she felt with each word. Red, the heat of the sun at midday touching your face. Catherine closed her eyes. She thought of the warmest day she could remember, a summer day with her sister Marianne when they were girls, running through the backyard, laughing under the sun. "Yes," she whispered, "I see red." "No," Rosie corrected gently. "You feel red. There's a difference." Catherine opened her eyes. "You're right. I feel red." "Exactly. That's what Danny learned first. That colors aren't just things you see. They're experiences you live." They went through each color. Blue, yellow, green, purple, orange. With each one, Catherine closed her eyes, remembered, felt, understood. And when they finished, something had changed in Catherine. She couldn't explain it with words, but she had learned to see in a new way, not with her eyes, with her soul. The next day, Sunday, Danny had his first painting session with Catherine present. Rosie guided, Danny painted. Catherine watched in silence. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a reverent silence, like being in a museum contemplating a masterpiece. Except this masterpiece was being created in real time by a 14-year-old boy who had never seen a color in his life. At the end of the session, Danny had created something new, a painting of warm colors, reds, oranges, yellows mixed together. "What did you paint?" Catherine asked. Danny smiled. "I painted gratitude, the feeling that someone is finally here, with you." Catherine had to leave the room. The tears were too much. The weight of lost love and found love was too much. Rosie found her in the hallway, crying. "It's okay," Rosie said, putting a hand on her shoulder. "Pain and joy sometimes feel the same. It means you're truly alive." Catherine nodded. "How do you do this? How do you see so much when I was so blind?" Rosie smiled. "Because my mother taught me. And now I taught Danny. And now Danny is teaching you. That's how love works. It multiplies, it's shared, it spreads." Catherine looked at Rosie with total admiration. This woman, this housekeeper, this teacher without a formal degree, was wiser than any famous artist Catherine had ever met. "Rosie," Catherine said, "I need to offer you something." Rosie frowned. "What is it, ma'am?" "A job, not as a housekeeper. As the director of a new program I want to create." Rosie stood still. "What kind of program?" "An art program for visually impaired children, in my galleries, with your method, with the color dictionary, teaching other children what you taught Danny." Rosie opened her mouth, but no words came out. "I'll pay you 4 times what you earn now," Catherine continued. "I'll give you a team of teachers to train, unlimited resources, everything you need. I just need you to do what you do best. Teach people to see with their souls." Rosie shook her head slowly. "I can't accept that, ma'am." Catherine felt a pang of disappointment. "Why not?" "Because I don't want to work for you," Rosie responded. "I want to work with you, as partners, as equals. If we're going to create something real, it has to be together." Catherine felt new tears forming, tears of respect, of gratitude, of amazement at this extraordinary woman. "Then partners," Catherine said, extending her hand. Rosie took it. "Partners." And in that handshake began something that would change the lives of hundreds of children across the United States. But that would come later, because first, there was something more important to do, something Catherine had been avoiding for 2 years, something she could no longer postpone. It was time to visit Marianne's grave and take Danny with her. It was time to ask her sister for forgiveness, even though she couldn't hear her anymore. It was time to show Marianne that her son, the blind boy the world thought was limited, was creating beauty that the world needed to see. It was time to tell her dead sister that finally, Catherine was fulfilling the promise she should have made from the beginning, to take care of Danny, not just provide for him, but to love him. And that's exactly what Catherine would do. The following Monday, Catherine did something she had promised to do for 2 years, but never had the courage. She called her assistant. "Cancel all my meetings this week, all of them." Her assistant was silent on the other end. "Mrs. Ramirez, you have the presentation with the Japanese investors on Wednesday. It's a $50 million contract. Have someone else handle it. I have something more important to do." And she hung up. That afternoon, Catherine asked Danny, "Would you like to visit your mom's grave with me?" Danny stood still. He hadn't been in 2 years. Catherine had never offered to take him, and he had never asked to go because he didn't want to be a burden. "Yes," Danny responded quietly. "I would like that very much." The cemetery was on the outskirts of the city, a quiet place with old trees and stone paths. Marianne's grave was simple, a granite headstone with her name and dates. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that reflected who she really was. Catherine and Danny stood in front of the grave in silence. Rosie had come with them, but stayed at a distance, giving them space. "Danny," Catherine said, "there's something I need to tell your mum, and I need you to hear it too." Danny nodded. Catherine knelt in front of the grave. The tears were already falling. "Marianne," she began, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I chose pride over you. I'm sorry I didn't call you when I could. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me." Her voice broke. "But more than anything, I'm sorry I didn't keep my promise. When you died, I promised to take care of Danny, and I used to think that caring meant giving him money, food, a house, education." Catherine glanced at Danny. "But your son has taught me that that's not enough. He's taught me that what he really needed was love, presence, believing in him." Danny reached out his hand. Catherine took it. "And someone else had to teach me that, a housekeeper named Rosie. She saw in Danny what I was too blind to see. She saw talent, she saw potential, she saw an artist." Catherine pulled something from her purse. The painting Danny had made for his mother. The warm colors, the red and orange oval, the peaceful blue, the joyful yellow. "Look at what your son created, Marianne. He painted this for you. He painted his memory of you with colors he's never even seen. And it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life." Catherine placed the painting against the headstone. "I'm going to keep my promise now. I really am. Not just provide for Danny, but love him, know him, be present. And I'm going to make sure the world sees what he can do, what you knew he could do all along." Danny knelt down beside Catherine. He put his hands on the headstone. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling, "Aunt Catherine is here now, really here. And Rosie is teaching me to paint, and I can see colors in my mind, not with my eyes, but I see them." His voice cracked. "And I know you can see me from wherever you are. So I'm going to keep painting. I'm going to create art that you can feel, because Rosie says that love transcends everything, even death." The three of them stayed there for almost an hour, crying, remembering, healing. And when they finally left, something had shifted, not just in Catherine. In all three of them, the weight of 2 years of guilt had lifted. The weight of 2 years of feeling like a burden was gone. The weight of keeping secrets had dissipated. They were family now, really family. Not by obligation, but by choice. 2 weeks later, Catherine made a decision that would change everything. She was going to host an art exhibition in her main gallery, but not of famous artists, not of works that cost millions, of Danny, of a 14-year-old blind boy who saw colors with his mind. Rosie was nervous. "Catherine, I don't know if this is a good idea. Danny's just a child." The critics can be harsh. That's exactly why I need to do it, Catherine responded. Because the world needs to see that true art doesn't come from college degrees or years of formal training. It comes from the soul. And Danny has more soul in his paintings than most professional artists I've ever met. They told Danny about the plan. He panicked. What if no one likes it, he asked. What if they say my paintings are ugly? Then we'll learn from that, Rosie responded. But Danny, true art isn't about pleasing everyone. It's about expressing truth. And you express truth in every brushstroke. The exhibition was scheduled for 3 weeks later, in Catherine's main gallery in Chelsea, the same place where she showcased works by famous international artists. Catherine invited art critics, collectors, journalists, other gallery owners. More than 200 people RSVP'd, but she didn't tell them what the exhibition was about. She just said, "You are going to see something you've never seen before, something that will change your perspective on what true art is." During those 3 weeks, Danny painted every single day, creating new works, with Rosie guiding, with Catherine watching and learning. He created 18 paintings in total, some abstract, some with recognizable shapes, all filled with raw and honest emotion. His favorite was the one he painted the day before the exhibition, a painting he called Family, 3 figures. A small one in the center, one on each side, all connected by lines of warm colors. "Who are they?" Catherine asked, even though she already knew. "You, Rosie, and me," Danny responded. "Because I'm part of something now. I'm not alone anymore." Catherine had to leave the room to cry again, but these tears were different. They weren't from shame or regret. They were from pure joy. The night of the exhibition arrived. The gallery was packed, 234 people exactly, dressed elegantly, sipping champagne, waiting to see what Catherine Ramirez had to show. The paintings were hung on the walls, each with a small plaque, but the plaques didn't have any information yet, just the title of the work. Catherine stepped onto a small platform. The microphone amplified her voice throughout the gallery. "Good evening. Thank you for coming. Tonight, I'm going to show you something different, something that took me 52 years of life and 30 years in the art world to finally understand." The crowd was attentive. "I've spent my career surrounded by beauty, works by famous artists, pieces that cost millions, art that the world considers important." Catherine paused. "But 4 months ago, I discovered something. I discovered that the most powerful art I had ever seen wasn't in my galleries. It was in my own home, created by someone I had ignored, someone I had treated as an obligation instead of a gift." Murmurs in the audience. "The works you see this evening were created by my nephew, Danny Soto Ramirez. He's 14 years old." Catherine took a deep breath. "And he is blind since birth. He's never seen a sunrise. He's never seen a face. He's never seen the colors he's painted on these canvases." The gallery went completely silent. "Then how is that possible?" someone shouted from the back. Catherine smiled. "Because he had an extraordinary teacher, a woman who worked as a housekeeper in my home, a woman who saw talent where I only saw disability, a woman who taught him that colors aren't things you see, but things you feel." Catherine looked for Rosie in the crowd. She was in a corner, trying to be invisible as always. "Rosie Mendoza, please come up here." Rosie shook her head. "Catherine, no, please," Catherine insisted. Rosie slowly walked to the front. The crowd began to applaud. They didn't know why, but they felt that something important was happening. "This woman," Catherine continued, tears welling in her eyes, "has taught me more about art in 4 months than 30 years of professional experience. She's taught me that true art isn't in perfect technique. It's in honest emotion. It's in seeing with the soul." Rosie took the microphone with trembling hands. "I didn't do anything special," Rosie said. "I just believed in a boy who deserves to be believed in, and I used what my mother taught me. that blind people don't live in darkness. They live in a world of sensations, of emotions, of colors that you and I could never imagine. "And what about Danny?" someone asked. "Where is he?" Catherine smiled. "He's here. Danny, please come out." Danny had been waiting in a side room. With Rosie's help, he walked toward the front of the gallery. The crowd parted for him. When he reached the podium, Catherine handed him the microphone. "Hello," Danny said shyly. "My name is Danny, and I paint what I feel." His voice grew stronger. "I can't see my paintings when they're finished, but I can feel them. I can remember every stroke, every color, every emotion that I put on the canvas." Danny turned his face toward where the crowd was, even though he couldn't see them. "And I know some of you will think this is a trick, that someone painted for me, but I promise you it's not. Each of these paintings came from my hands, with Rosie's guidance, with the love of my Aunt Catherine." The audience was completely silent. And if there's one thing I've learned in these last few months, it's this: we're all blind in some way. You can see colors with your eyes, but how many of you really feel them? How many of you see art and feel something true? Danny smiled. "I can't see with my eyes, but I see with my soul. And that's something no one can take away from me." The silence lasted 3 seconds more. And then the gallery exploded in applause. Not polite applause, a standing ovation, applause that lasted a full 5 minutes. Catherine hugged Danny, Rosie hugged them both, and the three of them cried in front of 234 people who had just witnessed something they had never seen before. True art, not just on the walls, but in the people who created it. After the speech, the crowd began to walk through the gallery, looking at the paintings with new eyes. They weren't seeing technique anymore. They were seeing soul. A famous art critic, Javier Dominguez, stood in front of the painting, My Mother in Blue, for 10 minutes. Not moving, just looking. Finally, he approached Catherine. "I've been critiquing art for 30 years, he said. "I've seen works in Paris, in New York, in Tokyo. I've written about famous painters. I've destroyed careers with my reviews." He paused. "But never, never in my life have I felt what I just felt looking at this painting." He pointed to My Mother in Blue. This boy captured something that the best artists in the world spend their whole lives trying to achieve. He captured pure love, emotional memory, nostalgia turned into color. Javier looked directly at Catherine. "This isn't amateur art. This is true art, and the world needs to see it." At the end of the night, something happened that Catherine never expected. A woman approached, elegantly dressed, about 60 years old. She had tears in her eyes. "How much is the painting, My Mother in Blue?" she asked. Catherine was quiet. She hadn't put prices on them. She didn't know if anyone would want to buy them. The woman continued, "I lost my mother 3 years ago, and when I saw that painting, I felt her. I felt her warmth, her love, her presence." The woman took out her checkbook. "I'll give you whatever you ask. Name your price." Catherine looked at Danny, who was nearby with Rosie. "Danny, someone wants to buy your painting, the one of your mom." Danny tensed up. "I don't want to sell it. It's Mom's." "I understand," the woman said. "But can I explain something?" She knelt down to be at Danny's level. "My name is Eleanor Vargas. I'm a doctor, and when my mother died, I had nothing that helped me remember her the right way. The photos made me cry. Her things broke my heart." Eleanor gently touched Danny's hand. "But your painting doesn't make me cry with sadness. It makes me cry with joy, because you captured what all mothers are: warmth, love, peace, joy." Eleanor took a deep breath. "If you sell me this painting, I promise to honor it. I promise to take care of it. I promise to remember my mother every time I look at it, and to remember that you, a boy I never knew, helped me heal." Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "How much would you give me?" Eleanor looked at Catherine. "What's a fair price for art in this gallery?" Catherine thought, Her galleries usually sold works for between 10,000 and 500,000 pesos, works by professional artists, works that had taken years of training. But this work was different. It was more valuable because it came from a place of absolute truth. 15,000 pesos, Catherine said. That's the starting price for new artists in my galleries. Eleanor didn't hesitate. I accept, but with one condition. What is it? That money goes to Danny, not to charity, not to a foundation, to him, because he's the artist. And artists deserve to be paid for their work. Danny couldn't believe it. Someone wanted to pay 15,000 pesos for something he had created, for colors he had felt but never seen. Rosie squeezed his shoulder. See, she whispered. The world can see what you see. Danny nodded. I accept, but with a condition of my own too. What is it? Eleanor asked. That you promise me that when you look at it, you're going to feel not just your mother. You're going to feel mine too. Because this painting is for all mothers, for all who love and are loved. Eleanor began to cry. I promise. And so Danny's first painting was sold for 15,000 pesos. To a woman who saw in colors what she had felt but been unable to express for 3 years. Before the night was over, 4 more paintings were sold to different collectors for prices between 8,000 and 20,000 pesos. Total, 73,000 pesos. For a 14-year-old boy who 3 months earlier thought he could never create anything of value. When the last person left, it was almost 11 o'clock at night. Catherine, Rosie and Danny sat on the floor of the empty gallery, exhausted, emotional, transformed. You did it, Catherine said to Danny. You showed the world that art has no limits. No, Danny corrected. We did it. The 3 of us. Because without Rosie, I never would have learned. And without you, Aunt Catherine, no one would have seen what I created. Rosie smiled. And without you, Danny, I'd still be just a housekeeper who kept her passion in a drawer for 15 years. You gave me back my purpose. Catherine looked at the 2 people who had completely changed her life in 4 months. You know what we're going to do now? She asked. What? Rosie and Danny responded at the same time. We're going to create a program that teaches art to blind children all over the city. Using your method, Rosie, using the color dictionary. And Danny is going to be our assistant teacher. Rosie opened her mouth. Catherine. Partners, Catherine interrupted. Remember, partners. We're doing this together, and it's going to be free for any child who wants to learn, whether they can pay or not. Danny felt tears forming. My mom would have been proud. She is proud, Catherine said. Wherever she is, she's watching this, and she's smiling. If you've made it this far in the story, let me ask you something. How many times have you judged someone based on their limitations? How often have you assumed someone couldn't do something because they had a disability? How many times have you overlooked talent that was right in front of you because it didn't come in the package you expected? This story is real in the sense that it happens every day. There are Dannys all over the world, kids with disabilities who possess incredible talent, but no one takes the time to see it. There are Rosies all over the world, people working jobs that don't reflect their true abilities because life didn't give them another choice. And there are Catherines all over the world, people with resources but without time, with money but without love, with opportunities but without connection. The question is, which one are you? And more importantly, are you willing to change? Because this story teaches us something fundamental. Love isn't complicated, it's simple. It's time, it's attention, it's believing in someone when no one else does. It's seeing with the soul instead of just with the eyes. And sometimes the greatest miracles come from the most unexpected hands, from housekeepers with yellow gloves, from blind children with paintbrushes, from millionaires who finally learn that the most important galleries aren't in Beverly Hills. They're in the kitchens, where love is taught. They're in the guest rooms, where miracles are believed in. They're anywhere someone decides to see beyond the obvious. and discover the hidden beauty. 6 months after that first exhibition, the Art Without Limits program opened its doors. It wasn't just a class, it was a movement. Catherine had donated an entire space in her main gallery. 3 large rooms, unlimited materials, 14 teachers, personally trained by Rosie, and 50 blind children who were about to discover they could create beauty. Rosie was the director. She no longer wore a maid's uniform. She wore what she should have always worn, the clothes of a recognized professional teacher. Her salary was now $6,000 a month, 4 times what she earned cleaning houses. But it wasn't for the money that Rosie did this. It was because every blind child who walked through those doors was an opportunity to honor her mother, to continue the legacy of the Dictionary of Colors, to prove that darkness isn't an absence of light, but a different way of seeing. Danny was the youngest assistant teacher in the program. At 14 years old, he helped other children discover what he had discovered, that colors live in the soul, not in the eyes. His favorite painting, the one he called Family, hung at the entrance to the program, a reminder that no one is alone if someone decides to see. And Catherine reduced her work as CEO to 20 hours a week. She hired a co-director to manage the daily operations of her galleries, and she dedicated the rest of her time to something she had ignored for 52 years: real life, real connection, real love. Every morning at 6 o'clock, Catherine was at the program, watching Rosie teach, seeing Danny guide other children, learning that success isn't measured in sales or contracts, but in lives touched, in smiles of children who finally believe they can create something valuable. Art critic David Miller wrote an article about the program that went viral. The title was, "The Most Important Revolution in American Art is Being Led by a Former Housekeeper." The article generated 3 million views. Dozens of journalists came to interview Rosie, Danny, and Catherine. 3 television channels made documentaries about the program. But the most important thing wasn't the cameras or the fame. It was what happened with the 50 children. At the end of the first year, 42 of those 50 children had significantly improved in confidence, communication, and emotional expression. 20 of them had created paintings good enough to be exhibited professionally. 5 had sold works to private collectors, and all, absolutely all of them, had learned something that no one had taught them before, that their disability wasn't a limitation, but a different way to experience the world. A 9-year-old girl named Lily painted her first work and called it The Sound of the Wind. It was a swirl of blues and greens that captured exactly what was impossible to see but easy to feel. When asked how she did it, Lily responded, "Rosie taught me that blue sounds like the ocean and feels like the wind, so I painted what I hear when the wind blows." A 12-year-old boy named Kevin created a painting called the My Guide Dog. It was a mix of warm browns and bright yellows. When asked why he chose those colors, Kevin explained, "Because my dog is warmth, he's happiness. He's the sun that guides me when everything is dark." Stories like these multiplied. 50 children, 50 unique ways of seeing the world. 50 reminder that true art doesn't require working eyes, just souls that feel. The program grew. In the second year, there were 100 children. In the third, 200, as Catherine opened locations in Chicago, Dallas, and Miami. She trained 50 more teachers. She invested $1 million of her own money, and every dollar was worth it. When she saw the face of a blind child holding their first finished painting, that mixture of pride and disbelief, that realization of, "I did this, I am capable, I matter." Rosie was invited to give lectures at universities, at art conferences, at special education symposiums. She who had lost her job as a teacher 15 years ago due to budget cuts, was now considered one of the most innovative educators in the United States. But Rosie never forgot where she came from. Every time she gave a lecture, she carried two things: her mother's dictionary of colors and her old maid's uniform. "This," she would say, holding up the notebook, "is what my mother left me: wisdom, love, a different way of seeing. And this," she would say, holding up the uniform, "is a reminder that miracles don't come dressed in suits. They come dressed in uniforms. They come from hands that clean floors, but can also clean souls. They come from people the world doesn't see, but who have the power to change lives." Danny continued painting. At 16 years old, he had his second solo exhibition. He sold 14 out of 18 works, total $40,000, money that Danny donated completely to the program. "I don't need the money," he explained. "I have everything I need: an aunt who loves me, a teacher who believes in me, a family that finally is real. What I need is for other kids like me to know that they too can create beauty." At 18, Danny was accepted into the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, to study visual arts. He was the first blind student to be admitted into that program. The university created special adaptations for him, and Danny became a symbol that education should be accessible to all, regardless of physical abilities. Catherine and Danny became inseparable. Dinners were no longer lonely. They were conversations lasting hours, about art, about life, about Danny's plans for the future. Catherine finally got to know her nephew for real and discovered that he was more intelligent, more profound, and wiser than she had ever imagined. One day, 3 years after that first exhibition, Danny asked Catherine, "Aunt, do you ever regret not having known me sooner?" Catherine thought carefully before answering. "I regret the 2 years we lost," she said honestly. "But I don't regret the path that brought us here. Because if I hadn't failed, I never would have learned. If Rosie hadn't taught me, I never would have changed. And if you hadn't forgiven me, I never would have discovered what true love is." Catherine took Danny's hand. "Sometimes the biggest mistakes lead us to the greatest miracles. And you, my love, you are my miracle." Danny smiled. "You're mine too, Aunt, because you gave me what I never thought I'd have. A family that truly sees me." Mary Ann's grave became a regular visiting place for Catherine and Danny. Every month, they brought a new painting. They placed it against the headstone. They told Mary Ann about the program, about the children, about how her son was changing the world. And although Mary Ann couldn't answer, Catherine felt that somehow she knew that from wherever she was proud, not only of Danny, but of Catherine too, for finally fulfilling the promise she should have kept from the beginning. Rosie remained an integral part of the family. She was no longer a housekeeper. She was a teacher. She was a partner. She was a friend. She was chosen family. Her 2 daughters graduated from college thanks to Rosie's new salary. One became a doctor. Another became a teacher like her mother. Both worked in the program on weekends, giving back what their mother had given. And the Dictionary of Colors, that old notebook written by Rosie's mother, it became a published book. Rosie wrote an expanded version with the help of Danny and Catherine. It included sensory descriptions of all the colors, exercises for teaching art to blind people, and 50 stories from the children in the program. The book was called Seeing with the Soul, the Art of Teaching Color to Those Who Cannot See. It sold 50,000 copies in the first year. The proceeds were donated to the program. The book reached art schools in 15 countries. Teachers around the world began using Rosie's method. And slowly, the way the world taught art to people with visual impairments began to change. It was no longer about adaptation, It was about transformation. It was no longer about compensating for limitations. It was about celebrating different ways of perceiving beauty. 5 years after the day, Catherine came home early and heard Danny describing colors she had never seen. The Art Without Limits program had 500 children in 4 cities across the United States. It had trained 100 teachers. It had exhibited 1,000 paintings. It had changed 500 lives. But the numbers don't tell the real story. The real story is in Sophia, 9 years old, who now believes that the wind has a color and that she can paint it. It's in Carlos, 12 years old, who understands that his guide dog not only protects him, but is also his artistic muse. It's in Danny, who at 19 years old, gives lectures at universities about inclusive art and inspires thousands of people to see beyond the obvious limitations. It's in Rosie, who regained her purpose and proved that it's never too late to become who you really are. And it's in Catherine, who learned the hardest lesson, that all the money in the world is worth nothing if you don't have someone to share it with, that the most beautiful art galleries are empty without love, that success without connection is just loneliness disguised as achievement. The last painting that Danny created for the 5th anniversary of the program was called From Darkness to Light. It wasn't literal. It didn't depict a blind person gaining sight. It represented something deeper, how love can illuminate what is dark, how faith can create color where it doesn't exist, how one person's belief can transform the life of another. The painting is permanently displayed in the entrance of the program, and underneath there is a plaque with words that Rosie wrote: "Colors do not live in the eyes, they live in the soul, and the soul doesn't need light to shine, it only needs love to awaken." This story doesn't have an ending, because stories like these never truly end. They continue in every child who learns to paint, in every teacher who believes when no one else does, in every family that chooses love over obligation. They continue in you, because now that you know this story, you have a choice. You can close this page and forget, or you can remember. You can remember that there are Dannys all around you, people with abilities that you don't see, because you're looking in the wrong place. You can remember that there are Rosies all around you, people working in jobs that don't reflect their true talent, waiting for someone to give them a chance. You can remember that maybe you are Catherine, busy, successful, but blind to what really matters. And if you are Catherine, let me tell you something she learned. It's never too late to change. It's never too late to see. It's never too late to choose love over achievement, presence over productivity, connection over career. The greatest miracles in life don't come from hospitals or churches. They come from kitchens where housekeepers teach love, from guest rooms where impossibilities are believed, from hands covered in paint that never saw the colors they created. They come from you, if you choose to see them, if you choose to create them, if you choose to be the person who believes when no one else does. So I ask you one last time, which of them are you? And more importantly, what are you going to do with what you now know? Because this isn't just a story about a blind boy who learned to paint. It's a story about all of us, about how we choose to see the world, about whether we see limitations or possibilities, about whether we see obligations or gifts. It's a story about seeing with the soul instead of just with the eyes. And if you've learned that, then this story has fulfilled its purpose, because now you too can see colors in your mind, colors of hope, of redemption, of a love that transforms everything it touches. And those colors, my friend, those are the most beautiful of all. They speak of hope, of renewal, of a spirit that refuses to be broken. They are the colors of second chances, the colors of a life not just lived, but celebrated. Remember that, Danny. Remember that even in the darkest corners, beauty can bloom, and love can conquer all. Never give up on finding your colors, the ones that make your heart sing, the ones that paint your world with joy and purpose. And when you find them, hold on tight, for they are the truest treasures life has to offer. This is Catherine's legacy, a testament to the power of love and the enduring beauty of the human spirit. Let it inspire you, let it guide you, and let it fill your life with color.